For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas. As we come on the air tonight, the United States has announced it will consider airstrikes in Iraq. The announcement comes after the Islamic State in northern Iraq continued making gains. Advancements by the group has led to tens of thousands of residents fleeing to the mountains for cover. As ISIS continues to expand its control, it has taken large areas of the country. Increasingly, ISIS is the main beneficiary of previous U.S. interventions in Iraq and Syria. The ceasefire in Gaza entered its last few hours today. It remains unclear if the talks between the Palestinians and Israel in Cairo will result in a more permanent truce. A Hamas spokesperson says Israel has not responded to Palestinian demands that include the lifting of the blockade on Gaza. Here's our Gaza correspondent, Noor Herzine.
Fighting in Gaza has ceased since 8 a.m. Tuesday, bringing relief to the residents of the coastal enclave after 29 bloody days of the Israeli operation entitled Protective Edge that caused the death of over 1,800 Palestinians and 67 Israelis. In the third and last day of the 72-hour ceasefire, Palestinians are lining up in front of bakeries and shops, trying to stock up as many food supplies as they can, fearing that continued fighting could bring them back to the same curfew conditions they experienced during the operation. We don't know what will happen to us in the next few hours. Tomorrow might be the first day of a new ceasefire, or it might be the continuation of this operation on Gaza. So we are out buying food and water enough to feed the family for at least a week. Israel and Hamas appeared at odds on Thursday over extending a 72-hour Gaza ceasefire, with Israel indicating it will be an unconditional extension, but Hamas denying any agreement. Egyptian mediators have intensified efforts to extend the truce after it expires Friday at 8 a.m., shuttling between Israeli and Palestinian delegations in Cairo. The Palestinian delegation has demanded an end to the siege of Gaza, the construction of a seaport and airport, the release of detainees who were rearrested, and the creation of a safe passage between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Officials close to the ceasefire talk in Egypt said that the Israeli delegation has expressed reservations over building a seaport and airport, but showed greater flexibility in discussing lifting the blockade, freeing Palestinian detainees, and extending the fishing zone.
The next hours could mark the beginning of either a new truce or a new escalation, while the people of Gaza are anxiously awaiting to see what will be brought to them on Friday. Noor Herzine, Telesur TV, Gaza.
In another sign of Latin American solidarity with Palestine, Bolivian President Evo Morales today called for a boycott of Israel. Morales joins a long list of prominent personalities advocating for a boycott. They hope such measures might pressure Israel to respect human rights in Palestine.
An invasion from the Security Council of the United Nations. That's what's going on with Palestine. These are invasions of force, which perhaps also come from multinational bodies, and that represent the economic model. Of capitalism.
Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos was inaugurated for another term today. It will last 4 years until 2018. Santos won re-election in June with 51% of the vote and a 5-point lead over his closest rival. He won the election despite losing the support of former President Uribe, a former ally. Uribe turned on Santos due to Santos's pledging to continue peace talks with rebel groups to end Colombia's 50-year civil war. Santos's position proved successful, allowing him to build a broad alliance in support of continuing the talks.
Our first pillar will be peace. 4 years ago, I said the door of the dialogue was not closed. From the very same moment, we dedicated ourselves patiently and methodically to build in a peace process that is serious, dignified, realistic, efficient. A process that learns from the past and puts an end once and forever to our history of violence.
In a statement released today, Argentina's government announced that it has filed a challenge with the International Court of Justice at The Hague. The measure challenges a U.S. court ruling forcing the country to pay the so-called vulture funds. Leaders from the South American nation claimed that a U.S. court ruling preventing Argentina from paying its creditors was a violation of Argentine sovereignty over its own political and economic affairs. Argentina is requesting that the International Court resolve the impasse in conformity with law and justice. In another sign of NATO backing for Ukraine, the Western Military Alliance confirmed today it will train and fund Ukraine's military. The announcement followed a meeting between NATO and Ukrainian leaders in Kiev. The Ukrainian army will join NATO military exercises, while Ukraine also will attend the forthcoming NATO summit in September, despite not being a member of the bloc. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in eastern Ukraine worsens as government forces close in on rebel-held cities. The UN estimates nearly 1,400 people have died in the violence since April. As part of the fallout from the crisis in Ukraine, Russian Prime Minister Medvedev today released a list of banned goods that the West will not be able to export to Russia. The retaliatory measures follow Western sanctions announced last week on Russia. The ban, which will be in effect for 1 year, will affect producers from the U.S., EU, Australia, Canada, and Norway. Latin America is expected to step in and replace some of the boycotted Western companies. Russian authorities also signaled that the ban could be lifted if the West's sanctions are dropped. Today, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden received a 3-year resident permit issued by Russia. Snowden is wanted by the United States for revealing U.S. mass surveillance programs that targeted millions of citizens worldwide, as well as governments. Snowden fears he will not receive a fair trial if he returns to the U.S. He faces charges that could lead to 30 years in prison. In 2018, Russia will permit Snowden to apply for citizenship. The Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro is celebrating the centenary of the late Latin American author Julio Cortázar until the end of the month. The writer played a leading role in the flourishing of the Latin American boom period in literature. He influenced an entire generation of Spanish-speaking readers and writers. 2014 has been declared the year of Cortázar. More on those and other stories at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle.